The allure of an open world game is something that most developers find very hard to ignore. And though there are many studios out there who do end up using all of that real estate in all the right ways, there are just as many who don't do it nearly as well as they should. Whether it's because of a lack of interesting content or a lack of content, period, all too often, open worlds in video games end up feeling barren, unengaging, uninteresting. Here, we'll talk about a few such games. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Metal Gear Solid 5 is and always will be a stealth masterpiece, and while nothing will even diminish the game's mechanical strengths, its open world doesn't quite stand as tall. The open world maps are full of vast stretches of nothing, populated only by the occasional enemy patrol, and getting from point A to point B ends up feeling like a chore. The emergent sandbox of the game's web of mechanics does alleviate some of those issues, but by and large, it's hard to shake the feeling that the Phantom Pain's open world wasn't executed nearly as well as it could and should have been. Metal Gear Survive. While the Phantom Pain's open world had some really strong redeeming qualities, Metal Gear Survive feels wholly without merit. Rather than building on the solid base of Metal Gear Solid 5, this horrible monstrosity wearing the skin of a Metal Gear game comes with nothing but mind-numbing busywork and torturously repetitive quest design. Simply existing in this game's world feels like a punishment. Rage 2. Rage 2's open world is, admittedly, significantly better than that of its predecessor, but that wasn't a high bar to begin with, and on its own, Rage 2 feels lackluster. While being barren is very much the point of this post-apocalyptic wasteland, that doesn't preclude an open world from being interesting and fun to explore. Just look at Mad Max, a game made by the same developer, which had a much better open world than Rage 2 did in a very similar setting. Mass Effect Andromeda. Mass Effect Andromeda was one of many AAA games that fell victim to the open world craze, and like a few other high-profile examples, it failed to bake that reinvention into the series' core formula properly. Simply having large open spaces has never been enough. Games need to fill them with meaningful, engaging content. And that's something that Mass Effect Andromeda just didn't understand, which meant that the only thing the open world accomplished was padding out an already uneven game with an ocean of boring content. Dynasty Warriors 9. Dynasty Warriors 9 is a prime example of a game that didn't get the memo that reads, quality trumps quantity. The hack-and-slash action title puts players in a massive playing field and then did absolutely nothing with it. Its world is bland, full of swaths of a whole lot of nothing, and what little content there was sprinkled throughout the map was dull and repetitive. Dynasty Warriors 9 was at its best when it was just being a regular Dynasty Warriors game, which should tell you all you need to know about its open world experiment. Fuel. Speaking of games that do nothing with absolutely massive open worlds, Fuel is probably one of the biggest open world games you'll ever play, but though it's virtually impossible for most games to stand toe-to-toe with the game in terms of sheer volume of real estate, it all falls apart when you actually play the game. It's all empty calories, built on a crumbling foundation that's as wide as an ocean and as deep as a puddle. The fact that even as a plain and simple racer, Fuel doesn't nail the basics only worsens the quality of the overall experience. Mafia 3. It's hard to find a game where there's as much disparity between the quality of the story and the quality of the gameplay experience as there is in Mafia 3. There's no shortage of reasons for why Hangar 13's crime thriller disappoints so heavily in the latter category, and its open world map is definitely one of them. Being completely by the numbers and lacking any real creativity would have been bad enough, but the fact that a bevy of technical issues make even the simplest sandbox activities feel broken completely ruins the experience here. Two Worlds. To be fair, if a more technical, proficient, and better-looking game had had the open world that Two Worlds did, it probably wouldn't have qualified for a list such as this one. Two Worlds' large map was quite impressive for its time, and exploring it could be genuinely enjoyable on occasion. But the laundry list of technical issues bogging down the game almost completely negated all of that environment. It doesn't matter how large or interesting an open world game is if the game is doing everything it can to make sure that you're unable to actually enjoy it. Superman Returns. Superman Returns might not be the worst Superman game ever made, but it comes close enough. That might seem like very harsh criticism, but as the unlucky few who've played this game will tell you, it's completely warranted. The open world is little more than set dressing with very little to do, and even in that limited pool of content, none of it is fun to play. This is a poorly made, terrible looking, clunky mess of a game, and no part of it has many redeeming qualities, especially not the open world. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Even a bad Spider-Man game should at least be able to do the open world stuff, right? Right? I mean, that's the whole point of the character. Being able to swing around in a large open sandbox should be inherently fun. Well, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 proves you wrong, with boring and unimaginative content littered all throughout its lifeless and hollow world, with clunky and arduous mechanics weighing all of it even further down. Both before and after this came out, we've had excellent Spider-Man games set in well-designed open worlds, which makes the flaws in this game look even starker. Driver. Criticizing Driver will never get old or become outdated, because no matter how much time passes, we, and many others, will never be able to get over just how bad this game was. At the best of times, it was a hodgepodge of bad ideas and decisions being held together by ancient crumbly duct tape, and at the worst of times, well, the less said about that, the better. The fact that this game was even allowed to release will never not be surprising. Sniper Ghost Warrior 3. The Sniper Ghost Warrior series has tried to reinvent itself more than a few times, and some of those attempts have been more successful than others. The least successful one, however, was Sniper Ghost Warrior 3, which was yet another victim of the open world trend. Vast stretches of emptiness are a hallmark of poorly designed open world games, and that's very much one of the biggest issues here as well. It feels even more egregious, in fact, because all too often, it keeps pulling you away from what's basically the whole point of these games. The sniping. Risen 3. Credit where credit is due, beneath the endless layers of crap that encase Risen 3, buried deep down inside is a genuinely engaging RPG, with impressive mechanical depth and some well-done fantasy world building. But is any of that good enough to put up with all of the aforementioned crap? The answer will vary depending on who you ask, but as far as we're concerned, no. No, it isn't. It looks like a game that should have come out 10 years before it did, and it's brimming with technical issues. RPG diehards can find some stuff to love here, but Risen 3, sadly, just doesn't know how to stop getting in its own way. Crackdown 3. With the promise of large-scale, over-the-top destructibility, Crackdown 3 should have been a slam dunk in the open-world space. It wasn't feels like an understatement here, but it's an effective encapsulation nonetheless. Crackdown 3 feels like it's stuck in the mid-2000s, completely ignoring all the improvements and advancements open-world game design has been able to make over the course of a decade. Instead, it delivers an aged, outdated, bland, and utterly boring map of hollow, boring content. Ghost Recon Breakpoint. One might argue that Ghost Recon Wildlands itself didn't do as good of a job with its open world setting as it could have, but while that game was at least enjoyable on a fundamental level, its sequel, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, didn't even have that going for it. Its world was drab, and what little there was to do in it was weighed down by boring design, broken combat, and even worse, artificial intelligence. Bolt an unnecessary and dysfunctional loot system on top of that, and you get a recipe for an unsalvageable mess. And that brings us to the end of this video. A quick request before we conclude: we upload new videos every single day, and if you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing. It really helps us out. Also, don't forget to enable all your notifications by clicking the bell icon so that you can receive daily video updates. Thanks for watching.